You may recognize us as the company that's been building Bowsers for 30 years. They're on flight lines of military bases and commercial operators worldwide. This SealVac is one of our newer products. And though it may look a little bit complicated compared to a fuel Bowser that you're used to using, after this training video, we'll have you operating it like a pro. Does this look familiar? Tired of draining fuel the old way? It's slow, dirty, messy, and unsafe. SealVac solves these problems, and it is faster, cleaner, and safer than any other fuel drain method. In this video, we're going to show you how to stop doing this and start draining fuel the safer and easier way, the SealVac way. The information in this video is derived from SealVac Technical Order 37812-25-1. This manual is available from your technical order custodian. Before we use the SealVac today, it'd be great if we could cover some of the major parts. The SealVac operates off an air source. The air source connection may look a little different for your unit. This is a standard Air Force connector, but the connection will be real similar. It's very important that we use an air source requirement that will operate the SealVac properly. We're looking for a minimum of 100 psi, 68 cubic feet per minute. If you exceed that a little bit, not a problem, but that should be a minimum to operate the SealVac properly. After we connect the air source here, it will actually pressurize air across this aluminum block that has a Venturi machined in it, and that will generate a vacuum across here that will generate vacuum for the tank and for these secondary plates here. It's similar to blowing across a straw and seeing liquid come up. It works exactly the same way. This here is a very important safety component. This shuts off the tank at about 90% full to prevent you from overfilling it. It works on a simple float valve inside, lifts up this lever which shuts off the vacuum. Everything's got a valve on it. Our main vacuum here, and each of the 4 main connections have their own valves on them too. And we also have a valve on this depuddling hose connection here. Now real quick, let's cover how to connect our hoses. The hose here is called a duplex hose, and that's because there's 2 separate hoses inside a single sleeve. This is a carbon impregnated fuel hose that provides static dissipation, so we won't be generating any static. And to connect it up, we simply stick it into the fitting here, push it until it snaps. And we'll do the same thing with the secondary vacuum here that will hold the plates on. Push it on the nipple, push it till it snaps. This is an important feature to prevent damage to the SealVac in the aircraft. This here is the vacuum breaker. It'll open when the vacuum in the tank reaches 8 inches of mercury, and it protects the SealVac and the aircraft from damage. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools we'll be using today. They're all similar but different shapes. It consists of a vacuum hose here that will actually adhere this to the aircraft. We've got seals on them. They're made of Viton, so they are fuel proof. This will vacuum it up to the aircraft surface, and this one here will seal around the fuel sump. These holes allow you to simply hang it up on these hooks here. Now, we've got different shapes here, and the SealVac comes with many of these. This here is our elongated one. This one here is a special one for getting into tight connections that might be against a wing body joint. We have round ones. So we have all kinds of different shapes and everything for different applications. In the TO is listed a table that tells you what plate is recommended for what sumps on your aircraft. So refer to that, especially initially, to help you set up your plate selection for your aircraft. Towards the rear, we have our bonding clamp and grounding clamp. We have our valves, including the main drain valve. Up here is the funnel, in case we need to use this as a standard Bowser. And this works exactly the same as Bowsers have for the last 30 years. This might be helpful if you don't have an air compressor or something in an unimproved airfield. A very important feature is the fuel level gauge on the top. Should check that frequently to make sure that you're not coming close to filling the tank. Over in this side box, we have some important components. This is what we call our fuel probe. This will be the part that actually vacuums the fuel off the aircraft and fits into the tools that were in the other side box. This window here lets you view the fuel flow as you're pulling it off the aircraft. You'll see that this one has a pin inside of it, and let's talk about that next. Inside each SealVac is a little accessory drain kit. We call it the pin kit for short. Be sure you follow the TO to select the right pin. You go from the shortest to the longest to where you get the best fuel flow. Using a pin that is too long can cause damage to the aircraft. Also in this side box is some grease for putting on the seals and the alignment pin that I'll show you how to use later. Each SealVac ships with a utility hose. This is used to go into the top of the tank, get off any remaining residual fuel, and depuddle the tank as you would with any other fuel bowser. Before we use the SealVac for the day, let's make sure we do a quick walk around inspection. We'll start at the front. Some things we want to look at is to make sure that the tow bar parts are here and nothing fell off during towing. While we're down here, let's look at the steering rods. These can sometimes get bent if the SealVac is backed improperly. One of the first things we want to check after we get the SealVac positioned is the brakes. Apply them by pushing it up, just like the legend says. And if you don't feel any tension, go ahead and adjust the knob on the end. You should just feel tension as you apply it. A good way to check that they're working is to give the unit a good push. While we're here, let's check the vacuum heads valves and make sure they're all positioned properly. Each fitting has a valve that should be in the off position, which is 90 degrees from the flow of the plumbing. And the main tank vacuum should be also shut off. This is the duplex hose that we will be using. Let's just make sure that all the parts are here. And the hose doesn't appear to be leaking or have any cracks in it. Inside the vacuum head is a FOD screen. This typically gets debris that you vacuum out of the aircraft fuel tank. If there's something in there, go ahead and clean it out and dispose of it properly. While we have it open, let's make sure the vacuum head seal is serviceable. We'll put this back together before we use it. These are the side boxes that your base may have installed. If they're not here, they're at the CTK that you need to check out. If they are here, chances are you signed out a key. Go ahead and open it up. Make sure everything that you need to accomplish the job is in there. We do use the show and no concept. Any parts that are missing, we have on the unit ready for use. Check the tire pressure and make sure that the tires look serviceable and don't have any cracks. We do have the tire pressure on the unit for your convenience. The brakes are in the area right behind the rear tires. While you're back here, make sure everything looks serviceable and no parts are missing. When we're in the back of the unit, take a look at the grounding cables and make sure that they're serviceable, not frayed, and they're connected to the aircraft and earth ground properly. On the rear of the tank, we have 3 valves. We need to make sure they're all closed before we operate the unit. The sample valve, the tank drain valve, and the funnel drain valve. At the top of the rear of the tank is our gravity drain funnel. Just make sure all the parts of the clamp are here. Open the funnel up and check the seal. Make sure it's serviceable. We'll come around to the top of the tank. Very important to check the fuel level gauge to make sure that we are as close to empty as possible. It's important not to overflow the tank while we use it. This is the top manway. We'll open it up, look at the manway seal, make sure it's in place and serviceable. And while we're here, let's take a look inside the tank and make sure we don't have any cracks or anything unserviceable on the inside of the tank. Now that our daily walk around is out of the way, let's get a few safety tips in. One thing we want to check first, let's make sure our bonding and grounding straps are in place. You'll have open fuel lines, so no smoking within 50 feet of the aircraft. You should have fuel signs posted around the aircraft so those approaching the aircraft know that you're going to be working with open fuel lines. And being that your fuel drain hose is 35 feet long, that'll be the maximum that'll be away from your work area. It's a good idea to position the SealVac downwind from where you're working to the maximum extent of the hose so you don't expose yourself to fuel vapors. Well, let's talk about PPE equipment. Required PPE equipment will be a good set of rubber gloves, a face shield, a rubberized work apron, a set of ear defenders because the SealVac in operation can be kind of loud, and have at least one rag handy to clean up any drips. I'll get suited up so we can get started. We're going to connect the air source now, so make sure your air compressor is off first. Connect it to the unit. Turn it about 30 degrees to lock it into place. Your unit may have a different air connector. If so, I'm sure hooking it up is similar. Then you can go ahead and apply air to the air compressor now that once we got it hooked up. Next thing we're going to do is uncoil the hose here. Make sure you don't have any kinks up at the tank end. And stretch this thing out past your work area. Make sure the hose is nice and straight without any kinks in it. Then you can come back to your work area. Now to get this system to work, I got to go apply the vacuum. I've already selected one of the shorter pins and it's in place. We provide some Vaseline grease. It's a good idea to wipe some on these seals. It just helps them seal up against rivets and splay against the aircraft surface real nicely. You might find it nice to put a little bit of grease there too, so that when you put it into the hub, it actually will go in and not fight you too much. Using our alignment tool, I'm going to stick it up inside of there. And we're going to line this up to the actual aircraft and push up on this valve. Pushing up on that valve and engages the vacuum here. Take a look up in there, make sure we're centered on the sump. And then stick this up in and turn it 90 degrees. Now we're vacuuming the fuel off. When we're done, go ahead and pull this down. Vacuum off any residual drops. Grab a rag and wipe off the aircraft. And now I have a couple of operational tips that will help using the SealVac go even smoother. If you have the fuel hose connected to the aircraft, keep in mind that even with the vacuum shut off, you can still have some gravity draining or residual fuel going down the hose, and that would be filling up your fuel tank, of course. So if you were to get called away on a job or maybe go on a break, it's always best practice to disconnect the fuel hose from the aircraft first. That way you won't be overflowing the tank while it's unattended. In the overview, we talked about the auto shutoff. Remember, that shuts off at about 90% full, so you still have a little bit of capacity to play with in the tank. The reason we did that is, even with the vacuum that shut off to the hose, you're still going to have several gallons of fuel inside the hose that you're going to have to evacuate before you roll it up. We thought of that with this vacuum override. You push this button in here, and it will override the auto shutoff valve. That will allow you to disconnect and evacuate the fuel hose before you roll it up. You won't spill anything on the ground that way. Just be sure to refer to the manual or the tech order for the steps involved. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the use of the utility hose. This hose is the same that's been on fuel bowsers for decades. It allows you to go into the top of the tank and vacuum fuel out through an access panel. You can also clean FOD out of the tank with this hose. To connect, it's a little different than the other hoses. You simply fit it in the fitting and push the wings down until it locks in place. Give it a shake to make sure it's in there. The other end of the hose is the part that does the vacuuming. Think of it as a shop vac for fuel. To operate it, make sure the vacuum is on and turn the valve on the hose and it's operational. To shut it off, close the valve and shut off the main tank vacuum. Now I'd like to cover a few issues that could cause you some operational problems with your SealVac. The number one thing that I'd like to talk about is the air source. We've talked about it before, but I really need to stress it. 100 psi, 68 cubic feet per minute as an absolute minimum. Also, you should make sure you have a hose that's at least a 1/2 inch internal diameter, just like this fitting is here. Something that could happen is while the vacuum is applied to the plate, it could get laid down on the ground or something like that. What would happen there is this little hole would vacuum up twigs, rocks, little sticks, and of course then it isn't going to seal the aircraft very good. It's only about a 1/2 inch deep, so inspect down in there and make sure there's nothing in there. If that looks clean and it still doesn't stick very well, and you've checked your air source requirement, take a good look at the seal. Chances are you'll have a little bit of a tear in the seal and you need to replace it. If you've ensured you have a good air source and you've inspected your vacuum plates and you're still having a vacuum issue, make sure that the vacuum head seal is serviceable all around and not contributing to your problem. This is a two-man job to lift this off. Disconnect the hoses. Don't worry about putting them back because they are sized slightly different. There are 4 rubber connectors and a ground. Lift it straight off, move it to the back. While you have this off, take a good look at the seal. Take a look inside, and chances are you're going to find some sealant or other FOD in here. Clean it out and just throw it away. One more thing you can check is the main vacuum generator muffler, and it's located right here at the rear of the vacuum head. Sometimes it can get saturated with fuel and it'll cause a decrease in vacuum. Simply unlock the end cap by turning clockwise and slip out the foam insert. You can wring the fuel out into a bucket or directly into the SealVac via the manway. When finished, slide the insert back into place and reattach the cap. If you're still not getting a good tank vacuum, there's one other place you should check. Make sure that the funnel drain valve is closed. That prevents you from drawing a vacuum through these clamps and causing a major vacuum leak.
Inspect tires for condition and pressure. Inspect hoses for condition and serviceability. Inspect the drain tools for overall serviceability and pay special attention to the condition of the seals. Inspect the brakes for function and ensure all the parts are present. Inspect the tank weldment inside. Pay special attention to the baffles. Inspect the outer tank wrap inspection port. This is located on the bottom of the tank, rear of the back axle. Inspect the funnel clamp parts for serviceability and ensure all parts are present. Inspect the funnel seal for serviceability. Inspect the manway seal for serviceability. Inspect the sediment chamber seal for serviceability. While you have the sediment chamber lid off, clean debris from the sediment chamber FOD screen, if present. Inspect the bonding and grounding cables. Ensure the reels are serviceable and the cable is not frayed. Inspect the tow bar for serviceability. Pay close attention to the pivot point parts. Inspect the steering tie rods. Ensure they are serviceable and not bent. Inspect and repack bearings yearly. The procedures are located in the technical manual.